Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Senstennial Podcast. Today's episode, we're going to be recapping a road trip that started on a high, ended on a low, but that's your Ottawa Senators, baby. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about injuries and obviously Zub's injury still coming along. We don't know what his timetable for return is quite yet. Obviously, David Perron has been away from the team, so we're going to talk about possibly the impact that that's had on the team. And of course, now the latest injury was Shane Pinto being sidelined. So we'll talk about how all that's kind of factored into the team and generally just how the roster's been overall. So I'll kick it off to Bennett first because I know he's passionately awaiting his time to shine here on the podcast tonight. And in all his glory, Bennett, take it away. What have
Welcome
you
back.
thought? Yeah, welcome back because I know you missed last week, but we needed your scorching hot takes. Sens go, they pick up a 4-0 win against Utah, who had been up until that point undefeated at home. But it started a series of big L's for them. So Ottawa just made their franchise crumble back to the sickos. But yeah, after that, it wasn't as glorious. So I'll let you dig into that.
Yeah, the Suns are in an interesting place right now, and you say that you missed my hot takes. There's certainly been a lot of those within the fandom, a lot of overreactions, a lot of underreactions, and I mean, I'm not here to tell anyone how to feel. I think after 7 years or however many it is of no playoffs, fans are entitled to react however they want to the Senators of Ottawa. Um, if you're asking me, 4-4, 8 games in, exactly 500 with a new coach and new systems and stuff is not bad. I'm certainly not reaching for the panic button right now. I think there are encouraging signs as well as warning signs, and you could choose to fixate on whichever of those fits, however, how pessimistic you're feeling that day or optimistic as the case may be. But overall, I think that the Senators are probably about where I would have expected them to be at this stage of the season. I'll tell you what is worrying is that despite the fact the Sens have, 4 wins, and have been competitive in basically every game that they've been in, I think you could probably count on one hand the number of good periods that the team has had. And, doing a little bit of like quick math, like there's 3 periods a game, where 8 games in, that's like 24 periods. So it's like I'd say there's probably been maybe like 4 or 5 good periods in that time, which that in itself is not like a great metric. It's also not a real metric, but it's one that I'm choosing to use here. And yeah, I'm seeing signs of improvement in places from where this team was perhaps at this time a year ago. I think that there's I think that there are signs of life from players like Stutzler, who started off slow and kind of stayed slow for large portions of last year. He looks obviously much better. Clearly, whatever wrist issue had been bothering him seems to have been resolved, and he's playing well after a sleepy start. Tkachuk and Giroux, both of those guys have bounced back a little. They looked a little off the pace in the first 3 games. Many people commented on that. I agreed with them. We're seeing a little bit of a bounce back from them, which is great. Signs of life from Josh Norris, which is nice to see. He's got a couple of goals. He's still not really looking very effective outside of getting the puck into the net occasionally. Like we're still not seeing a lot of like playmaking from him or anything, which I think you'd really want to see from a player of his caliber. But credit where it's due. He's found the net a couple of times. He's settling in a little bit. Um, but there's some negatives as well. Goaltending has not been great. It's not been completely terrible, and I don't think it's why the Sens have lost the games that they've lost necessarily, despite what Linus Allmark would tell you. But I think generally it could be better. I think that, and we're going to talk about this obviously later on, I think that the defensive depth has been pretty suspect this year. And outside of Jake Sanderson and like Nick Jensen, no one has like really covered themselves in glory. And just seeing Artem Zub go down again really exposes us on the right hand side. But I'm gonna cut it off there and say the team is 500 after 8 games, 10% of the way into the season approximately. hard to say anything concrete at the moment, but things could definitely be going worse.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, a fair point. Like, as you said off the top, it's the team's 4-4. You could take that in a positive way, you could take it in a negative way. At the end of the day, Ottawa's very fortunate because the Atlantic in general has almost every team is off to like a 500 start. It's very interesting. So I think that thankfully the Sens aren't putting themselves behind the eight ball. Obviously, you'd like to see them finish off that win against Vegas. That, they
Hmm.
should have had that game. They played better than Vegas for most part of that game. Uh, I don't know what else to say about that. It's just you need to hold on. They go into Colorado and through two periods, you're like, oh, Ottawa's not going to get anything going. And then all of a sudden they wake up and they score four in the third period. And sadly, they end up allowing three, including an empty netter, before they scored what would have been the tying goal had they not allowed the empty netter. So that was, a pain to see, unfortunately. Whenever your team scores after they've pulled the goalie, you're like, damn. But, they at least took a couple of really good teams, uh, basically almost a full 60 minutes that it took for Colorado and Vegas to beat them. And I think any other of the past few seasons, we've already seen it. They get just blown out, or they don't look like they're even close to competing with those teams. So I think, gotta take the good with the bad. But I'll get Matt's thoughts before I go on a tangent here.
I looked at the last three games, and Matt, I made the prediction that we would beat Utah, we'd go to overtime against Vegas, and we'd beat Colorado because we would face Gorgiev, and a lot of that didn't come true. We beat Utah quite handily. Credit where it's due. Forsberg won us the game after we basically gave him a ton of runs, and all he had to do was stop some solid shots, and he showed up. Then against Vegas, they start hot. The Sens continue to keep putting pressure on Vegas. Vegas ties it up. We immediately take the lead again. Later in the game, they tie it up. We immediately take the lead again. And then in almost like comedic fashion, um, somebody who is who shouldn't be where they are, Nick Cousins, playing on the top line, takes a stupid penalty and puts them on the power play. They're 40% success rate power play. Um, like I think Travis Green has done a very good job as a coach thus far. But you know, how much leeway do these vets and cup winners get? Like Nick Cousins essentially cost his team the game. And then you have a leader in the room in Linus Olmark saying, if they had an NHL caliber goalie, we would have won that game. But not a peep from him saying I took a stupid penalty and I cost our team the game. And sure, you don't really expect a fourth liner to do that, but on that particular night, he was a first liner. So yeah, you better guarantee that he should be paying the piper. And what happens? He doesn't get benched. He doesn't sit in the press box. He gets to be on the first line again the next game with Michael Amadio. Like, I don't hate Amadio being there. I think he brings a lot of defensive capability to that line, which really needs it because man, oh man, Brady's defensive capability is really bad. Like he is not a defensive player whatsoever, and it's really shown the last couple of games. And despite himself and Stutzla having 10 points this season thus far, it doesn't look like they should, especially Kachuk. He I don't know what it is, but every year it seems like he has this sleepy start, but he's still putting up a solid point pace.
To be fair to Chuck, he always looks like that though. Like
No,
he's a guy
exactly.
who
It's
always
wild.
he like puts up 80 points or however many points it is, like consistently,
Yeah.
and like never looks good the whole time. Like he
Yeah.
has this like ability to just like get on the score sheet and like get things done without ever
Yeah.
looking like he can pass or shoot
Yeah.
the puck.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
It's
it's that is like his game. He's a very skilled forward, but not in kind of like a slick,
yeah.
like mitts or smooth skating kind of way. He's just like a kind of like a, like a disruptive force out there that can just like insert himself into a game in a way that allows things to happen for
Yeah.
the team that are good, even if like it doesn't look super, slick or anything. And again, like very useful skill set to have.
Yeah.
Lots of teams want that kind of skill set and don't have it. However, it continues to like amuse and like, entice Senators fans that he will consistently score, like 30 goals. And you find yourself often wondering whether he can actually shoot the puck or not.
Yeah, and it's Colorado, like their one of their announcers was like, "Oh, Brady Kachuk making himself like making his presence known by scoring a goal." And I'm like, "Damn, do they watch Brady Kachuk? Because that's what he does. Like
Mhm.
you don't see him and then he suddenly appears on the score sheet."
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
No, it's fine. I was just going to interject. What's really interesting is if you're going by like breaking down the expected goals against, goals for line mates, Brady Kachuk and Tim Stützle with Claude Giroux were really good defensively, but weren't getting it done offensively.
Hmm.
But then you look at Brady Kachuk and Tim Stützle with Michael Amadio, and it's even worse. They're
Yeah.
allowing way more goals with Amadio
Yeah.
and scoring fewer goals. But then you like it's just kind of a mashup. It's like you need to put somebody there, but I don't think that Travis Green has found that player because Giroux's been great with Norris and Batherson. So it's like, okay, well, who do you put with Kachuk and Stützle, especially if a guy like Shane Pinto's injured? I know he wouldn't necessarily slot in there traditionally, but if they're looking for a guy who they could elevate and put on that line, Pinto comes to mind as being a guy who could take like a center role there. And
Yeah.
you have Stützle and Kachuk on the wings because Stützle hasn't been a great face-off guy this year. In his career, he hasn't ever really achieved more
Yeah.
than I think 45% at the dot.
Mhm.
And then, interestingly enough, and where I want to go with this is looking at our best line when it comes to both generating offense and being really good defensively. Now, I say generating offense, I mean expected goals for, because
Yes.
this line,
Yes.
in terms of actual points,
Hasn't
had
done a whole hell
nilch.
of a lot.
But the Amadio Pinto Perron line, when they were together, were phenomenal at limiting the goals against, or their expected goals against was really low, but their expected goals for was quite high. So they were one of Ottawa's best lines. But yeah, otherwise, like nobody is playing downright bad, which is nice to see, at least
Yeah.
again, analytically. But that Stützle, Kachuk, Amadio line, it can't be a thing. They need a guy who can
Yeah.
help out offensively. And I know defense is what we want to keep preaching, and I totally agree. And there are some guys that you want to see take leadership in on that end of the ice. But I think that what Ottawa needs is a guy who can chip in offensively, but won't slouch defensively. Now it's easier said than done to find a player like that, but that's who they need for the top line.
I think my crazy hot take is that maybe Brady and Stützle should not play together for a little bit. And I think maybe Stützle and Batherson should be given a kick at the can. Because I feel like Batherson's play style suits Stützle way better than Brady suits Stützle's game. The Batherson's just faster. He's like when Batherson is on his game, genuinely is probably the best player on the ice. And that's saying a lot because there's a lot of excellent players on the Sens. But to this point, we're already facing this injury and personal leave bug, and it's like it's game 8, and Bennett, you definitely, I think we all kind of touched on it, but you had said we're one Zub injury away from being absolutely exposed.
Yeah.
And
it did not take long for that to happen.
no, I think it was what the yearly bingo card was game 4.
Yeah. Yes, that's like Zub's annual, 10-game absence. Usually it happens midway through the season. This year it came early. But yeah, I mean, any Senators fan going into the season would have told you that seeing Hamonic slotting in as the team's 7th D is a little spooky, because you know that if and when Zub gets injured, that means Hamonic plays, and Hamonic fucking sucks.
Yeah.
And
he had
him
2
on the
games
ice,
where everything was going right for him, and everybody was like, oh, maybe
Travis fixed him.
Yeah, he
listen,
had that surgery, and it suddenly fixed his brain.
As
it
something
did not.
that every young woman needs to hear in her life at one point. You can't fix him. He's just Hamonic is just like that, and he's going to revert to type eventually. And yeah, I mean, we're seeing it now as people are starting to say, "Hey, what's happened to Jake Sanderson?" And Senators fans tell you it's Travis Hamonic. That's what was always happening. He craters the like the defensive metrics of his line mates, of his like pairing partner, because they're constantly having to cover for his weaknesses. And friend of the show, Mika McCurdy on Twitter was really laying into Hamonic the other day and just saying that this guy
it's every
should
day, actually, just to clarify.
Yeah, he wakes up with hate in his heart for Travis Hamonic.
It's same as you with Jonas Korpisalo.
And I love that for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's rightfully saying like this guy has no place on an NHL roster, and I wholeheartedly agree. And we all knew that was a weakness going into the season, right? Like we all knew that.
Sorry to interject. I was just going to say, further to your point, like I posted this already on Twitter earlier today, but when you look at Sanderson with Zub, their expected goals against was maybe like 2.2, around there, and their expected goals for was just under 2. But essentially, they were providing good enough defense to help the Sens, against tough pairings. As soon as he was paired with Hamonic, that pairing has been Ottawa's worst pairing.
Mm-hmm.
It has cratered that pairing to nearly 3.5 expected goals against. And yes, their expected goals for have improved, but I think that is just, it's not outweighing the con of that line. And also, what's interesting, looking at the Hamonic Kleven pairing when it started the season, also a brutal pairing.
Yeah.
And you look now at Bernard Docker paired with Kleven, and they're one of the most positive contributors on the team in defense when you look at the expected goals against. So I think that really says something. If you put Hamonic on a pairing with 2 different guys, and it essentially plummets the production, because it's just, if you have one outlying pairing, maybe it's just a guy that is a bad fit with another guy. When you put 2 different pairings together with the same player, and all of a sudden the players with that guy both fall off, one being Sanderson, one being Kleven, maybe it's not the chemistry of those players together. Maybe it's one of the 2 players who's not carrying their weight.
Yeah.
So,
and Jake Sanderson is a -5 currently, which he has no business being, considering how well he has played in the majority of the games that I've seen him. And he's logging heavy minutes. He's this team's #1 defenseman that has absolutely been borne through by the playing time that he's getting this season. Again, proving to Senators fans what they already knew, which is that this is the team's #1 defenseman of the future, and the future is now. He's the guy. But when you saddle him with someone like Hamonic, like it's not just that you're tanking. It's not just like Hamonic's bad. It's like he's also making one of your best players bad, and that's it's like, even like it's almost like Kleven and Hamonic pairing was terrible. Like on the opening night at the
It was god
CTC,
awful.
like I have rarely seen defensive plays that poor in the flesh before. And I mean, like groans around the stadium, just everyone just like nail biting every time that those two were in the back end together. It was terrible, like legitimately terrible. And yet, if you were to ask me, I would kind of prefer him on that pairing if he has to play it all, because you know, a getting the best out of Jake Sanderson is like more important than getting the best out of Tyler Kleven, you know? And, you know, like if Sanderson's going to play 20, 25 minutes a night, you need him to be playing at his peak that we know he's capable of. Whereas, like, you know, yeah, like obviously it sucks having a bad third pairing, but it's still a third pairing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously the best case scenario is that Travis Green has the trust of the front office to just send Hamonic to the Shadow Realm, and you know, send him down to Belleville, or just, you know, like buy out his contract, or like whatever, place him on waivers, whatever you do, right, to get rid of a guy. Um, I would hope
Unfortunately,
that
none of that can happen. Like he has a no move clause. So the
right,
best bet
right,
is that he sits in the press box. And the only thing, well,
yeah,
there were a couple things that I didn't like about Travis Green, but one of the biggest ones was that he has coached Travis Hamonic before.
yeah,
And he paired him with Quinn Hughes.
yeah.
And that was some of the worst
Yeah.
hockey Quinn Hughes has played.
Yeah, which was a red flag when he came in, right? That he said, "Oh, you know, I have a history with Travis Hamonic." Well, he didn't. Maybe he didn't say that, but you know,
Yeah.
us inferring from, you know, what we can
Yeah.
see about his tenure in Vancouver, that he seemed to have faith in Hamonic and played him with his best defenseman, turning his best defenseman into a bad defenseman.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that play out again here, which is obviously worrying, because now it looks like a trend in Green's coaching that this is something that he does, and that he either doesn't want to, you know, just like indefinitely bench Hamonic because he likes the guy, or he, like, the more worrying prospect is that he doesn't think that he needs to be benched because, you know,
He's actually playing
at,
decent.
yeah, it's like everyone would tell you that he needs to be benched. You know, Senators fans see it, non-Senators fans see it. Like anyone who spends 60 minutes watching this team would say, "Why is Travis Hamonic playing at all? This doesn't make any sense." And it's worrying if the coaching staff doesn't agree, because it's just glaringly obvious.
So the one positive I will say about Hamonic being on that first pairing is the fact that Travis Green is keeping Bernard Docker and Kleven together, which tells me that he really likes that pairing and doesn't want to disrupt it.
Yeah.
Which further to me means that once Zub is back, Hamonic's going to be the healthy scratch and it won't be Bernard Docker. That's my hope. But then I also hope that Zub is back sooner rather than later, because it's a double-edged sword that if you leave Hamonic in that spot so Kleven and JBD can continue playing good, solid third pairing minutes, then like you said, Bennett, you now have a guy who's a paperweight on your top pairing, and that's not good.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
like
also,
I would rather have a hole at the bottom of the lineup than a hole at the top of the lineup, right?
yeah. And I also look at this as, why did the third pairing right shot defenseman go to the first pairing when, like, I know that Shabbat and Jensen have been playing well, but for me, I would have been like, oh, my second pairing right shot defenseman will move up to the first pairing because that's logical.
Yeah.
But I just like,
shift
I don't,
everybody up one.
it doesn't make sense. Like at the very least, Hamonic wouldn't be playing the toughest minutes against Nathan fucking McKinnon. And he got torched. Like there were clips of people just like McKinnon torched him. And it's like he's going to torch anybody, but it's going to be so much worse because it's him. And it's so frustrating that all of this happens because, like, I love Zub, don't get me wrong, but god damn it, this guy is made of glass. Like, holy Moses. Like, he misses 15, 20 games a year.
Mhm.
Like, how did you go into this season and it like all of this retrospectively, we're like, we should get another right shot defenseman just to shore up depth because we know
Mhm.
what's coming.
Mhm.
And what happens immediately?
Yeah. Shattenkirk's still a free agent, by the way.
Yeah, so was Justin Schultz. And then he was like, I'd rather go to Switzerland.
Yeah.
Respect. That is super cool. But the point is like, also you had a guy like Brandstrom was on waivers, like for less money.
Yeah.
Yeah. But from what I've heard, the only person in the front office who is high on him is Sean
Exactly.
Tierney. So
Yeah. It's super tough knowing that everybody could have seen this coming.
Yeah.
And you know, fortunately, like Bennett, to your point earlier, you said the goaltending hasn't been bad, but hasn't been good. And I think that's a fair assessment. I think it's been fine. I'd like to. We've stolen goalies have stolen 2 of 8 games. That's probably a better statistic than previous seasons so far. But I think uh, this whole Allmark injury thing has been really weird. I don't have a problem with Forsberg starting the game last game. I probably would have started him against Vegas, truthfully, because he just had a shutout, and you go back to him. But like the whole Allmark thing has been a bit odd, and I do like the point of just tell people what's going on. Like
yeah.
what's with all these transactions? Why are we having to decode things through the AHL transactions page? God.
No, it's a good point. I'm in agreement with you. Like, obviously, Olmark seemed ready to come back. If it were me, like, yeah, sure. I didn't mind him starting the Vegas game. It kind of came out of nowhere, which is cool.
Yeah.
But I also don't disagree with you when it comes to starting Forsberg, because you have a guy who just was out of the lineup for like what, a week and a half or something. So yeah, putting him back in against Vegas, which is a high scoring, high octane team, is, and I'm not that Colorado isn't, but I don't know. I look at those 2 games and maybe I would have gone Forsberg then Olmark rather than Olmark Forsberg. Does it make a difference? Who knows? At the end of the day, Sens are at 500. They're coming back home. We'll see how they do. I don't know. It's I'm going to move to another positive. How about this? There's a lot going on.
Bennett, stop him.
There's okay. Well, if you want to do negatives first, I mean, the penalty kill, 20th in the league, and Ottawa's goals against a game are 28th in the league. So defensively, still a work in progress. Obviously, like we said, I think goaltending will come along. It's kind of been, but I think
and
that'll
that
improve.
PK has Travis Hamonic on it now, and it didn't before. So
yes, true. Although Hamonic may be useless nearly anywhere in the lineup, but on the penalty kill, he would die before he if he could, before he lets a puck go by him into the net. Like, if some dude is like shooting, the little the football launchers that they do to practice.
Yeah.
If somebody was like firing pucks out of those and Hamonic was in the way of the net, he would like try and catch as many of those with his body as possible. You know what I mean? But obviously he can't. Maybe we should put him in net. Oh my god. Maybe he would block every shot, guys. I may have something here. We may have cracked the code.
I'm good.
Yeah, it's
tough crowd.
Not
crowd.
Obviously the defensive metrics of this team have just been not good. That's the goaltending metrics, like we said, like save percentage of 874. We're already below league average. Not surprising considering you've got games like the Vegas game and the LA game and the Colorado game in there. I mean, those were some real barn burners on both ends of the ice, and the Sens, came out the better in one of those and the worst in 2 of them. So obviously I'm not expecting the Senators to be leading the league in save percentage at the moment. We're hoping that'll be something that normalizes over time. However, the defensive metrics of the team in general have just been really poor, and that obviously
Yeah.
has to change.
Yeah.
I think we know why it's happening at this point. It's not really a mystery to any of us. It's largely a personnel problem. I think if Zub were in the lineup or anyone else who isn't Hamonic, that would be an improvement. Like Shabbat and Jensen have looked decent together. I know
Yeah.
people are always a little tough on Shabbat. I haven't noticed a huge number of like glaring weaknesses from him. Like he's been largely fine. Jensen has looked really solid. And like we said, Kleven and JBD are emerging as a respectable third pairing. And Jake Sanderson, when he's not paired with an absolute anchor, was playing at legit like a Norris ballot kind of way. And again, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see why suddenly that hasn't been the case the last couple of games.
And I love how with Thomas Chabot, the people who hate Thomas Chabot, they will never change. I literally the other day saw some dude, he's like, oh my gosh, Shabby doesn't like pick up his man there or whatever. I watched the entire clip like 5 times trying to find out where Chabot was on the play. He wasn't on the ice. it was
Yeah.
Jacob Bernard Docker and Tyler Kleven on the pairing, and the guy who he probably thought was Chabot was Noah Gregor because he wears 73. And I was like, so he's just like blaming Tom Chabot. So I commented, I was like, bruh, like he wasn't even on the ice, man. His pairing, he was on the bench when that play happened. Like, who is Thomas Chabot in this clip? Is he in the room with us right now? Like,
Yeah.
it was
It's like the 50 Cent, like, what did he say fuck me for?
Yeah. I wanted to go back to your point about team defense, Bennett, because I think that's really what's affecting the save percentage. And I know we've talked about that, like we said the same thing last year, and then we obviously changed our tune when it went to Jacques Martin and nothing really got better. But I look at a lot of what's happening and I'm just like, they just look frazzled. And to be fair, they have been running into, the last 2 games have been Colorado and Vegas. Those are 2 very, very good teams with a lot of firepower. And it just, but they just look lost sometimes, especially considering, I hate to bag on Brady's defensive game again, but Nick Cousins is not a good defensive forward. And you put him with Brady, and Stu is like, he's a 50-50 defensive guy. Sometimes he's awesome and sometimes he's not. And the 3 of them together, I'm just thinking to myself, like, what's going through your mind when you're putting that line together, so sort of thing. So I'm hoping Zub coming back, Pinto coming back, Perron coming back, like those are 3 big players being out of the lineup, and we're facing the adversity head on starting early, and we're 500. Obviously we've talked a lot about it and a lot about the negatives, but Matt, you talked about it earlier. Josh Norris, 7 points in 8 games, has looked like his hockey IQ is there. And it's nice to have his finishing ability back, because when Josh Norris is back to being Josh Norris, it's a good thing. I look at some of like the 4th line is actually really solid. I like Cole Reinhardt. I like Adam Gaudette. I like Zach McEwen, which I never thought I would say. And then
he has picked it up this season. So
he has. He looks really good. And then Chabot Jensen has been awesome. I am super happy with him. And that's exactly what Chabot has needed for years. I'm just hoping they didn't do it 3 years too late.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of positives, and I saw a lot of people saying, oh, I saw on Reddit, oh, we should trade Yakimchuk and go get something that'll help us right now.
Wow.
We're 8 games in. Like the Atlantic is right now, it's anybody's race. So there's no need to make any snap moves, but you're missing 2 top 9 wingers and a top 4 defenseman. I think you just need to get into a groove. What they don't need to do is go on a 7-game losing streak.
Yeah.
I think they have a good shot at beating the Blues on Tuesday. I like this team can't be as mentally fragile as they have been in the past, and it needs to start from all of the leadership and trickle it down to the equipment guys. It just needs to be mentally strong. You play a full 60 minutes, not a 56 minutes, and then falling apart.
Yeah. Now I will switch the gear one last time. We'll end on a positive note.
Love positivity.
Positive note, Ottawa had a dreadful power play last season. This season, Ottawa is firing at second in the league on their power play. That is an enormous improvement and can't overstate that enough. Like, that is huge that they're second league. And I know 8 games in, huge improvement. And when it comes to just regular goals for a game, they're 7th in the league. So thankfully, their offense is actually clicking. They're getting points. You could argue that they need to get more points at 5-on-5. Totally fair. But it's nice to see that the offense is not anemic like it was on the power play last year. So
yeah,
that's at least a positive. Glad that they're picking it up there. And now it's just working on the other 50% of the game.
I say we each of us finish off with one like bright spot so far. What's getting our goat?
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, it was kind of taken already, but you know what? No, I'll switch it up. I'm gonna go with the Kleven JBD pairing. You know what? I think the first couple games, Kleven did not look very good. I was really worried. I was like, oh no, we don't have like any left-hand defenseman in the system that could step in and play in the top 6 for I should say the bottom pairing, but you know what I mean, like the 6 defensemen you carry on the NHL roster. I was like, man, who do they have? And obviously there was no one really to go to. Like Sabrango, he's not an NHL caliber player. And so for me, that was worrisome. JBD obviously didn't have a great training camp. And so when he had to come in the lineup, I was like, oh man, like, how's this going to look? Especially Hamonic going to that top pairing. And while Hamonic hasn't worked out on any pairing, JBD and Kleven have really shown that they can play solid defense. And maybe it's that Nodak Sens chemistry that they got when they were at North Dakota together. But I don't know, man. They look really promising. And I hope that when Zoom comes back, he can stay healthy. No more concussions for the guy. And then I think that top 6 defensive pairings, whatever you want to call it, they look good.
Like it.
I'll give a shout out to Jake Sanderson, who I haven't touched on yet this episode, but who has looked really, really good with 5 goals and 5 assists. Like you said, when Sanderson is at his best, he has the potential to be one of the best players on the ice. He's typically not as consistent as someone like Tim Stützle in terms of production. He tends to be pretty streaky. However, when he is streaking, the results are great to see. And he's looked really good. And I think that if they can figure out how they plug that hole on the top right of our top line, then the Senators have a really strong looking top 6. Hopefully Pinto returning from injury will allow us to do that. What I would try in that situation is throw Pinto back at 3C and chuck Ridley Gregg up on that first line where he can use his speed to try and keep up with someone like Stützle. But all that just to say, Bathurst has looked really impressive, and the top 6 in general has been fairly firing so far this season, which is pretty good.
And you mentioned him. I'm going Ridley Gregg. He has been everything you're kind of hoping for in a sophomore player. I don't think he's picked up as many points as we had hoped, and he was out of the lineup a couple games. But every time I see him, he's always doing something. And I think you can't really expect a massive physical game from a guy who's 5'11", but he plays like he's 6'3". And I love that about him. He goes to the areas that you score, and I would love to see him playing with Stützle because they've got a lot of speed, and it would be kind of interesting to see the tenacity coming out. So my pick is the Riddler.
I thought one of you guys would mention it, so I'm just gonna give an honorable mention to Nick Jensen. He's had a hell of a start to his Ottawa Senators career, and hope he keeps it up. So, on that note, hope you stuck with us through our rambling and raving. Always appreciate it. Nice to have Bennett back. A very calm, cool, and collected Bennett today. No scorching hot takes, no unleashing the anger within. Like, there was no Evanescence moment. It was just like Bennett.
It builds over the course of the season. We'll get there.
Hopefully we can like skip the November blues and we'll see what happens after that.
That would be nice.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching or listening. Make sure to check our account out on Twitter at Senstennial. We're on Instagram as well at the Senstennial, and we're on Reddit, Discord. You can hit us up, drop us a message, and yeah, we'll stay in touch and go Sens go.
Go Sens go.
Go Sens go.